Hello everyone and welcome back. In the last video we looked at the 4 different components of blood, and in this video we're going to see that blood is super important. It does many different functions. In particular, we're also going to look at how blood clots, and we're going to look at this thing called tissue rejection. Alright, don't worry, it's nothing to do with being rejected and feeling salty. So what are the functions of blood? Well, we can summarize it with this diagram here. There are 2 main functions of blood. The first main function is transport, and the second main function is protection. Alright, and we'll see how each of these components plays a role in these 2 functions. So red blood cells help in transport. They help to transport oxygen. Right, and plasma helps in transport. Plasma transports all sorts of different dissolved substances. We looked at some examples in the last video. How about protection? Now, protection refers to protecting the body from foreign invaders, bacteria and viruses. And blood plays a very important role in protection. So let's start with the plasma. Now, the plasma contains clotting factors, which help in clotting. And clotting actually is part of protecting. Well, imagine you have a wound and you've cut yourself. That's an opening for foreign invaders like bacteria and viruses to come in and attack you. But clotting helps to seal up that wound so that you are protected. Alright, so that's the role of plasma. There's clotting factors. White blood cells, of course, fight infections. Whatever invaders get in, the white blood cells deal with them. Platelets play a role in clotting as well. And we'll see that red blood cells also play a role in clotting. They become part of the clot during the clotting process. Right, so 2 main functions, transport and protection, and how each component contributes to that function. From here on, we're going to be looking at each of the functions of blood in greater detail, starting with red blood cells transporting oxygen. So you should already know that red blood cells transport oxygen, and they do so by containing hemoglobin. Right, red blood cells contain hemoglobin, and hemoglobin binds oxygen. Now, something new to add on to that knowledge of yours is that hemoglobin binds oxygen, but it does so reversibly. And when hemoglobin binds to oxygen, it forms oxyhemoglobin. And that happens in the lungs. So in your lungs, there is a lot of oxygen. There's a high concentration of oxygen. So oxygen diffuses into the red blood cells, combines with hemoglobin, and forms oxyhemoglobin. This actually changes the color of the red blood cells slightly, making it look very bright red instead of its usual dull red. Alright, and so these red blood cells with oxyhemoglobin, right, they have already picked up oxygen. They move around your transport system until they reach the tissue cells. And when they reach tissue cells where there's a relatively lower oxygen concentration, because oxygen is being used up to do various activities, then hemoglobin lets go of oxygen and oxygen diffuses out of the red blood cell into the tissue cells. Right, so hemoglobin stops binding to oxygen. That's why it's reversible. It lets go of oxygen, which diffuses out into the tissue cells. And the red blood cell turns back to its dull red color. Okay? Now, moving on to the transport of dissolved substances, which is the function of the plasma. Right, I would like you to turn to your textbook and read it for yourself. There's a table there describing the different types of dissolved substances that are transported by the plasma. In particular, focus on learning and finding out how is carbon dioxide transported in the plasma. Alright, so have a read and then we'll move on. We now move on to the function of blood in fighting infections. The function of fighting infections is carried out by the white blood cells, and it's part of the protective function of blood. Now, when we learned about white blood cells, we saw that there were 2 types of white blood cells. One is called the phagocyte, right? And the phagocytes, they help to fight infections by carrying out phagocytosis. This is the process where they ingest or engulf foreign particles like bacteria. So this little cartoon shows you how that happens. This white blood cell senses the bacteria a nice meal and comes close, right? It extends out part of its cytoplasm, right? There's a name for this called the pseudopodia, but that's not very important. This part of the cytoplasm surrounds the bacteria, and then eventually a vacuole is formed inside the white blood cell where the bacteria are within the vacuole, and they're digested and eaten up. So bye-bye and sayonara, bacteria. Now the other type of white blood cell, the lymphocytes, also play a role in fighting infections, except they do not carry out phagocytosis, but they produce antibodies. And they produce antibodies in response to pathogens. Now pathogens is just a very nice scientific word to refer to all types of foreign particles and foreign invaders. For example, your bacteria and your viruses. All these are examples of pathogens. So when a lymphocyte senses a pathogen, it produces antibodies like these. So a very similar word to antibodies is actually antibiotics. And you might have heard of this word antibiotics when you went to visit the doctors. Now antibiotics are not exactly the same thing as antibodies. So go and do some research and find out what the difference is. Here's a hint. One is more natural than the other. Alright? Now this very sad picture here shows a baby with chickenpox. Now how many of you here have gotten chickenpox before? Maybe quite a few of you. Now how many of you have gotten chickenpox twice? Probably none of you. Now have you ever wondered why you can't get chickenpox twice? And the key lies in antibodies. Because the first time you get chickenpox, your lymphocytes produce antibodies to defeat the virus that causes chickenpox. And these antibodies can remain in your blood, and so you become immune or resistant to the disease from then on. Right? So the antibodies against chickenpox remain in your blood, and they keep you immune and resistant against a second attack. Which brings us to the second picture, which also involves a baby, except a baby with a needle. Now when you were young, you probably received a number of injections. What was the purpose of these injections? Well, they actually have something to do with antibodies as well. You see, injections are a way of inducing your body or causing your body to produce antibodies. And the scientific name for injections, the scientific word for injections is actually immunization. And what happens in immunization is actually I take some dead or weakened forms of pathogens and I inject it into you. So I'm basically injecting the dead or weakened bodies of bacteria and viruses into you so that your body will produce antibodies against these weakened forms so that you will have immunity against these pathogens. Right? I'm literally taking dead bodies and injecting it into you. Think about it the next time you have an immunization. So it's a bit like this comic here. A vaccine or immunization is like a training exercise for your body. Right? These are your white blood cells, and we inject some dead pathogens in, and they cause your immune cells to respond to produce antibodies, so that from then on your body actually develops antibodies and form an immunity to the real thing. So it's pretty cool. It's like a training exercise. Okay, so I think I'm going to pause here, and in the next video we're going to be talking about how blood clots. Now meanwhile, you can think about a time where you really got injured. I had one. I was cutting onions one day, very happily going to cook teriyaki chicken, cut, until I cut off a part of my thumb at the tip, and it just didn't stop bleeding for some time. Took a really long time to clot. But more on that next time when we talk about how blood clots.